For decades, the Middle East lived under one simple assumption. Iran had one man at the top, one ideological commander, one final authority over war, peace, missiles, militias, and the future of the Islamic Republic. That man was Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And then, in a single morning, the entire system was shattered. On February 28, 2026, Iranian air defenses watched the sky and failed. Israeli jets and precision missiles slammed into multiple strategic locations across Tehran. Not random targets, not symbolic strikes, but a classic decapitation operation. The target list was simple: top commanders, strategic facilities, and the supreme leader himself. 30 bombs hit the compound where Khamenei was located, part of a joint operation reportedly supported by US intelligence and surveillance networks. When the dust settled, Iran's most powerful man, the man who had ruled since 1980 was dead. Just like that, no revolution, no internal coup, no mass uprising. A surgical strike, the geopolitical equivalent of removing the king directly from the chessboard. And suddenly the entire Middle East entered territory nobody had planned for. Because Khamenei wasn't just a political leader, he was the system. In Iran's structure, the supreme leader controls the military, intelligence agencies, nuclear policy, foreign strategy, and most importantly, the ideological legitimacy of the regime. Without him, the machine still exists, but the command signal becomes fuzzy. Think of Iran like a giant network of militant alliances stretching across the Middle East: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, various proxy groups across Syria, all of them together forming what Tehran proudly calls the axis of resistance. But here's the interesting part: many of those groups didn't just obey Iran because of money or weapons. They obeyed because of religious authority. Khamenei was considered the ultimate jurist, the spiritual commander who could legitimize war, and now that voice is gone. Which means the entire ideological chain of command suddenly looks fragile. But fragile does not mean weak, because Iran is not just a country, it's a security state, and security states are designed to survive leadership loss. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, already runs much of Iran's military power: missiles, drones, cyber units, foreign militias. And the IRGC reportedly controls a massive missile arsenal estimated in the thousands. So while the supreme leader died, Iran's military machine did not. In fact, it did what security states usually do when their leader is killed: it escalated. Within days of the strike, Iran and its proxy networks began launching attacks across the region, targeting Gulf infrastructure, airports, and Western-linked facilities. Energy markets shook. Airspace closed, missiles flew, the Persian Gulf turned into a geopolitical minefield, and suddenly the world realized something uncomfortable. Removing the head of the snake does not necessarily kill the snake. Sometimes it just makes it angry. But here's where the deeper geopolitical game begins. Because the strike itself raises a bigger question: why now? Why would Israel and the United States take the risk of eliminating the leader of a major regional power? The answer lies in three strategic fears. First, Iran's nuclear trajectory. For years, Western intelligence believed Iran was gradually approaching nuclear weapon capability. Not openly, not dramatically, but step by step, enrichment levels rising, advanced centrifuges operating, underground facilities expanding. Israel has always believed that waiting too long would mean facing a nuclear-armed Iran, and Israel historically does not believe in waiting. Second, the regional proxy war. Iran has spent decades building a shadow empire of militias across the Middle East: cheap, flexible, hard to trace. Instead of fighting wars directly, Tehran fights through partners: Hezbollah, rockets; Houthi drones, Iraqi militia attacks. From Israel's perspective, this network had to be weakened before it becomes unstoppable. And third, internal vulnerability. Iran, in recent years, has faced economic sanctions, protests, inflation, and generational dissatisfaction. So some strategists likely believed this was a moment of maximum pressure. Hit the leadership, destabilize the regime, force strategic retreat. On paper, it sounds like a clean strategy. In reality, geopolitics rarely behaves politely. Because when powerful regimes feel existential pressure, they rarely collapse quietly. They retaliate. Which brings us to the global implications: oil, shipping, and one tiny stretch of water that every major economy depends on: the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow corridor carries roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply, and Iran sits right next to it, which means if Tehran decides to disrupt shipping there, global energy markets go into panic mode. Oil prices spike, shipping insurance explodes, global inflation rises, and suddenly every country from Europe to Asia starts paying the price, including India. Now this is where things become strategically interesting for New Delhi. India has historically maintained a careful balance in West Asia, friendly with Israel, friendly with the United States, but also historically connected with Iran. Energy imports, trade routes, the Chabahar Port project, and the strategic access corridor toward Afghanistan and Central Asia. But India also depends heavily on Middle Eastern oil, importing more than 80% of its crude from abroad, which means any instability around the Persian Gulf directly affects India's economy. Fuel prices, inflation, trade logistics, even the value of the rupee. If tankers hesitate to pass through Hormuz, India's energy bill rises instantly. But there's another layer most people miss: strategic geography. For India, Iran is not just an energy supplier, it is a gateway. Chabahar Port allows India to bypass Pakistan and access Afghanistan and Central Asia. That route is strategically priceless, and if Iran enters prolonged chaos, that corridor becomes uncertain. which means India must walk a delicate diplomatic tightrope, support stability, avoid taking sides too aggressively, protect energy security, maintain strategic autonomy. Classic Indian foreign policy, calm on the surface, quietly calculating underneath. But step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. This event may reshape the entire Middle East, because leadership deaths inside authoritarian systems often trigger three possible outcomes: power consolidation, power fragmentation, or regime transformation. If the IRGC consolidates control, Iran may become even more militarized. If factions compete for power, internal instability could grow. And if reformists somehow gain influence, Iran might slowly open to the world. But here's the brutally honest geopolitical truth. Security states rarely reform immediately after assassination. They harden, they centralize, they prepare for confrontation. Which means the Middle East may now be entering a new strategic phase. Not peace, not resolution, but a long, tense, unpredictable transition. And meanwhile the world watches. Some Iranians mourned their leader, others reportedly celebrated in the streets. Diaspora communities argued, regional militias vowed revenge, markets fluctuated, and governments quietly ran war simulations. Because removing a leader like Khamenei is not just a military operation, it's a geopolitical earthquake. The shockwaves travel through alliances, economies, energy markets, and military planning. And here's the final irony. For decades, Western strategists described Iran as the destabilizing force of the Middle East. Now the removal of Iran's leader might create something even more dangerous: uncertainty. And in geopolitics, uncertainty is often more volatile than hostility. Because enemies you understand can be managed, but systems in transition, those are the ones that change history. And somewhere in Tehran tonight, new power brokers are already asking the most important question of all: not who killed the supreme leader, but who will replace him. Because in the Middle East, power vacuums rarely stay empty. Someone always steps in. The only question is who, and what kind of world follows after.